Welcome into the Barbecue Live, powered by Hound Hogs Barbecue Supply. Make sure you check them out at houndhogsbbqsupply.com, at Hound Hogs BBQ Supply on Facebook and Instagram. So want to welcome in to the show Josh DeBose and Roland Neal with Mrs. Griffin's Barbecue Sauce. They're out of Macon, Georgia. And I got to thank my good friend, Tony McGee, for connecting us. He has been a huge supporter of the show. And if you're listening, make sure you support him. He's got a great following on Facebook and Instagram. Why Not Georgia Barbecue? That's YNOT Georgia Barbecue. Make sure you check him out. Tony is doing a lot of great things for barbecue. But let's get right into it. So, Roland and Josh, you guys were at the governor's mansion yesterday. And tell me about that. Let's camp out on that for a second. Why in the world were some barbecue folks at the governor's mansion on a Wednesday?
Well, we got notification that there was going to be a National Barbecue Day in Georgia, and we got the invite and felt like, being that we have such a rich history, we are kind of the quintessential history of barbecue in Georgia, in my opinion, because we are going on 90 years old. So we made the journey up there and were able to meet several different colleagues within the barbecue realm and had a great time. Got to meet the governor, shake his hand, and just kind of take a little tour of the Capitol, see some things that are going on. It was a good time.
It was good to promote Georgia barbecue as an entity. We think Georgia has a unique history. It's kind of a hybrid history. And anyhow, it was a good time. Enjoyed being with those guys more than anything. Enjoyed meeting the governor. That was nice. And promoting the barbecue business in Georgia. Excuse me.
I love it. I think it's pretty cool. And that date, for those wondering, is going to be March 25th. That is National Barbecue Day in the state of Georgia. So you mentioned Roland and Josh both talked about history, and Mrs. Griffin's has a lot of rich history to it. I think Josh mentioned that going on 90 years. So let's camp out on that for a bit, because I think the story is really cool about the humble beginnings and now, a national brand right here in the state of Georgia. So how did all of this start? What's the story behind, I believe y'all are the oldest barbecue sauce in the country. Is that right?
We're definitely one of them.
From a continuous operation standpoint, we consider ourselves to be the oldest barbecue sauce in continuous operation. Starting back during the Depression and getting into around 1935 is when it got into the selling aspect, getting it into stores, because he had done a batch and everybody loved it. And he's like, well, what should I name it? Should I name it Mr. Griffin's? And everybody said, well, no, you should name it Miss Griffin's, because, it would sell better among the public. So he went with the name Miss Griffin's, and it's a name that stood for close to 90 years now.
Just to add on a little bit about that, the original Griffin family, Mangum and Etta, were from Columbia, South Carolina. And that's where Miss Griffin's gets its heavy influence from mustard over in your neck of the woods. And then the way it's after World War I, the Griffin family had a grocery store. And then around the time of the Depression, Mangum and Etta set out and left Columbia and settled in Macon, Georgia. But the family used to get together on 4th of July, and Mangum added a little bit of tomato paste to the straight mustard sauce. And anyway, that's kind of how it happened. Nothing like a live broadcast. They came to Macon, they opened a grocery store, and at some point they put the product out, Miss Griffin's as we know today, into other stores. And that basically started around 1935. So
how about that?
That's the story as we know.
1935. So tell me about this sauce, because I have yet to try this sauce. I've read about it. But let's camp out on the sauce in and of itself. What about it makes it unique? Because I think it is, from what I've read, again, I haven't tried it yet, but from what I've read, it's got a uniqueness to it that I think is really popular, obviously, So let's talk about the sauce. What makes it different? What makes it unique?
Well, the first thing is we're going to get you some sauce right away. But
There you go.
what makes it different? It's made in a very traditional mold, and we've held the tradition of a low sugar mustard tomato paste. Just has no ketchup in it. So it's tangy over sweet. Although we will admit, the last about 2 years ago, we did make a sweeter version. We call it Miss Griffin Sweet. But it's really very traditional South Carolina, Georgia, low country type sauce. Did you add anything?
No.
Okay. That's how we feel about it. So yeah.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. The tangy part is what I've read a lot about, which I think, definitely sets it apart in and of itself. And, at the end of the day, when you go to the grocery store, there's a lot of options to choose from. And I heard somebody tell me once that you can't sell a second bottle of sauce unless you sell a first bottle. So
That's right.
I think when I look at, y'all's product, and I look at the color of it, I think the color, just right there is unique. Just in and of itself, the color I think is unique. And you talk about the mustard and the tomato paste. I mean, I can definitely see that just with the color. So I love your tagline too for our listeners. That the tagline is putting South in your mouth since 1935. So that's a pretty
That's
cool,
right.
pretty cool tagline. And so you mentioned, Roland, you've got a sweet version too. So there's the original and there's a sweet. Do you have any other varieties?
Yes, of course. We have a hot version. We have a hickory smoked version, the sweet version, and then the original. The original sells better than any of them. I mean, that's our bread and butter. But yeah, we do have those other four. We keep it kind of narrow. Like I say, we tend to hold real close to the traditional roots, and we're a regional favorite. We're good in about 5 states, but just like your barbecue restaurants in Georgia and South Carolina, they have their own kind of taste to them. Whereas you go to Memphis or Chicago, it's going to be a lot redder, a lot sweeter, which is not what we do. We're regionally correct.
And if I could just add something to that, the way I see it is kind of like to steal Frank's. You put that stuff on everything. I'm not gonna, but that's kind of how this sauce is. It is a barbecue sauce, but it's multi-dimensional as to what it can be used for. I mean, it's used from everything from chicken strips to Brunswick stew. So I mean, you don't really want to put it in the box of a barbecue sauce. It's more along the lines of a multifunctional sauce is how I use it and how other people have told me that they use it.
So it's very versatile. Almost you might say it's an all-purpose sauce.
Yes.
It says on the label, goes good with everything.
I love it.
So,
I love it. And there is something to be said too, Roland. You talked about keeping your focus narrow, keeping it, focused on the bread and butter. Yes, you have a few other varieties, but there's something to be said for that because I think that, it's very easy for sauce companies, rub companies, you name it, to start coming out with all these different, product lines. And what I've seen happen over the years is sometimes they end up just kind of losing their way in what originally got them started. So you've touched on the traditional side of things a good bit. I'm curious as to when you say traditional methods of making the sauce, how much of that can you share? How much of that can you tell us about that process?
Yeah, the process is a great process. It's all natural ingredients, and we mix it right here in our own plant. We have 11,000 square foot plant, Macon, Georgia. The company owns the building. We're not renting from anybody that might kick us out or anything. We're very proud of that. We've always been made in Macon, Georgia. We all kind of team up. I have to give Josh a lot of credit, and Darius that is back there working the filling machines right now, and Charles and all the other guys. We get together and we do the batch, and we do it the same way we did it last time and the time before. And we have, some scientific equipment that tells us that it's the right pH. But, we really know that it's Miss Griffin's because the nose knows, we can tell. But we also have the scientific backup, and we also have the common sense backup. And we use the same vendors. Gosh, most of our vendors have been in business over 100 years. So they hopefully know what they're doing with their mustard and their tomato paste and everything. So not much jumping around on the ingredients.
Which I would assume leads to that consistency that your customers expect, right? Because they want to be able to, as you said, smell it. They want to taste it, and it's that consistency that I think is key. Now, you talked about how barbecue is regional, and I agree 100% there. Texas barbecue is much different than Georgia barbecue, is much different than Kansas City barbecue or Memphis barbecue. How you talked about the number of different states. You said about 5 states. Just paint us a picture. Where does that line kind of end for y'all? Is it effectively the Southeast where you're pretty dominant, and then once you get out of there, you kind of it gets too sweet for you guys? Is that kind of the gist?
Well, when you start heading up into the mountains of North Georgia, into Tennessee and places like that, you get into more ketchup-based barbecue sauce, and ketchup is certainly a whole lot sweeter than tomato paste. And like I say, we're kind of a low country sauce, I think. I don't know. We do real well when we sell, above Interstate 85, but I like to think, below 85 and above I-4 in Florida, which is basically Tampa, Orlando, Daytona, everything from north there to about 85 over. We could go way south into Mississippi, Louisiana, go all the way up to the Myrtle Beach, North Carolina line, South Carolina line. But that's our sweet spots for Miss Griffin's. And but there's always, people move around these days too. And Josh, I have to give Josh so much credit. He ships Amazons and our website orders and all kind of stuff. Every day we're taking stuff to the post office. So it's going everywhere.
That is great. And I think it's, again, it goes back to, sticking to your roots, sticking to the traditional process, focusing on what, your, as you call the bread and butter, that is sometimes, at least nowadays, sometimes lost with, this idea of growth and everything else. So, all right, let's shift over to some barbecue talk now, because we can't talk about this sauce. We don't talk about some barbecue. What got you guys started into barbecue to begin with? When did that journey start for you two?
For me, it started in 2010. I'm the third owner. Jim Wilcox owned it before me, and he bought it from the Griffin family. So I'm the third owner, and I was actually manufacturing, of all things, cosmetics. And Jim Wilcox was a very good friend of mine, and he knew I knew how to mix stuff and fill stuff, and he was ready to get out. So him and I came to an agreement, and then I rolled on with 2 companies manufacturing cosmetics, making barbecue sauce in 2 different buildings. And finally, it was a little much stress, so I sold the one cosmetic business to kind of concentrate on Miss Griffin's. And then One day I was talking to the guy who owns the cosmetic business, and I said, I need to find me a manager. And he said, well, I had a guy that applied, and he said, I liked him a lot. And he said, my wife wasn't crazy about him. And I said, well, what's his name? Josh DeBose. So I called him up, and I said, how you doing? I said, you ever heard of Miss Griffin's barbecue sauce? He says, no.
Yeah, see, I mean, for me, like he just said, I mean, I'm a Virginia boy, so I grew up on Rocky Mountain barbecue and Bill's barbecue. And for me, it's like you come down here and you ask for your barbecue dry with some coleslaw and hot sauce. They look at you like you're crazy. So I mean, yeah, walking in the door, I didn't know anything. I was like, "What is Miss Griffin's?" But I will tell you, I've been here a little over 3 years now, and I've, as with everything that I do, I put my heart and soul into everything, and I've put it into building this business, building it out, and trying to hopefully expand on where we are. Because to me, being, we are a local regional favorite, but you're the small guy in a $1 billion field. So I mean, to me, you have to work just as that much harder to maintain what you do have. And I mean, we're grateful from a company standpoint to have everybody that we have, because without them, as with anybody, without customers, you don't have a business. So I mean, for me, I get up every day trying to move it forward, and I've made some strides in doing so. So I mean, that's kind of where I am today with barbecue.
I just want to add that, Josh has made it fun again for me. And he gets out there. I'm 62 and he's not. He's much younger than I am. And he gets out there and really puts a lot of effort into it. And I'm just proud of what he's accomplished and what him and I both have accomplished. We really work well together. I hope you would say that.
I agree.
We have our moments. He's not a yes man, which is we bump heads.
That's good.
And
Yes.
that's good. No, that's good. That's
Part
okay.
of the process.
It's okay, but it's nice to have somebody that truly cares. So
And that right there, someone that cares, that takes pride in their work. I wish I could say that those types of folks are easy to find these days, but they're not. So that is that's saying something right there. Now, Josh, you talked about growth. You talked about, basically being a small fish in a multi-billion-dollar pond, so to speak. What does growth look like? I mean, what are your growth objectives if we look out over the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years? What is that? What are your goals there in terms of getting more exposure and branching out?
Well, I mean, to me, you got to start at home. I mean, you've got to shore up what you've got. And that starts with making sure, going into your stores, making sure they've got the product, that it's presented well. From an expansion standpoint, I mean, I see it as the sauce that you have to put in your mouth. And I say that because it's different. It's not something that it's not Sweet Baby Ray's to put a comparison to it. It's something that's very different. You're either going to like it or you're going to hate it. But a lot of people that I've dealt with, that I've had the opportunity to do tastings with, they love it. So, I mean, from a growth standpoint, it's all about educating, I mean, like going through Amazon and going through our e-commerce, platforms. Facebook has been a great resource, because that's your best bang for your buck, to be able to reach millions of people, thousands, millions of people for little to no investment up front. So the way I see it is we've got to keep kind of digging, and the more you dig, the more hopefully you're going to grow. And it's going to happen it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But my plan is, at the end of the race, I want to be there at the finish line with a product that I know has withstood the test of time, that hopefully in 2 to 3 years or sooner, that, we do develop more along outside of our core comfort zone, which is typically the Southeast.
Well, sometimes growth and change can be a little uncomfortable. So I commend you on, taking on that challenge to expand and get out of that comfort zone a little bit and reach, more folks with the sauce. I mean, and I think the story too that you shared is equally as impressive as the sauce itself, right? So, I think that story, and I think you guys do a great job sharing it. I've even seen it on your website. I think that goes a long way too, because that really, in my mind, solidifies, the fact that A, you are the oldest barbecue sauce in the United States, and B, it's amazing to think you've only had 3 owners in what 80, almost 90 years. I mean, that's not very common that you would have that few owners in such a long time.
I've never thought about that. I've never thought about that. Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I think that's pretty neat. A lot of times you see a lot of, you see businesses changing hands, family dynamics change, et cetera. And then sometimes, you see businesses change hands, and then in a couple of years, they're no longer in business. I think statistically, not to go down a rabbit trail, but statistically, when businesses change hands, the failure rate is really high. So a testament clearly to the folks that you've brought on and the vision that you've been able to cast out there, and just get out there to the community. But Josh, I love what you said about educating, because you're exactly right. I mean, it ultimately comes down to educating folks. And sometimes it's literally the one-on-one, or you're in front of 4 or 5 people, and then they share it with 4 or 5 people. And I think that's really, really powerful. So, again, the story I think is amazing. I think it's incredible. Now let's switch gears for a second. And before I forget, where can listeners of the show buy your sauce?
Well, they're above I-4 and below Interstate 85. They probably get it at their Walmart. If they're Southeastern Kroger, they could get it there. In April, they'll be able to get it at any Publix in Georgia. Pretty much any food line. You got W. Lee Flowers, the IGA guys over there by you. I don't know if you know them. What's that? KJ's Supermarket? KJ. Yeah. Really trying to work on we think we have a really good South Carolina. We think what Miss Griffin's would appeal to South Carolina purchasers. But yeah, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on our website. What do we got?
I mean, I think that pretty much covers it. At the end of the day, a sale's a sale, but ultimately you want to get people in the store, because that's how you generate, your interest in the product, and that's how word spreads and hopefully growth happens. But I think Roland covered it well. I mean, we're in Piggly Wiggly's, a lot of some of your small market retailers. I mean, if you're in Georgia, Alabama, northern Florida, and parts of South Carolina, you can generally find us in Walmarts. But if we're looking from a Georgia standpoint, we're pretty much widely available.
Can I ask a favor of all your listeners? Ask for us.
Absolutely. Shoot.
Line. Ask for
food
us.
Line. You hear that?
Food Line. That's our bullseye on the dartboard right now. We want Food Line. We want their business.
If you're listening to the show, take them up on that challenge. And I don't know if there's a way to put a request in at Food Line, but I think if enough people call or email, it'll absolutely get their attention. And like you guys said, easy to find if you're in Georgia, North Florida, parts of Alabama, parts of South Carolina, Kroger, Walmart, Publix starting in April. So Amazon, at your website even, which is griffinsbbq.com. What about social media? Where can they find you guys on social media?
We're on Facebook. If they search Ms. Griffin's barbecue sauce, we should pop up. And, anybody that goes to our website on the main page, they'll see a 30% off coupon. So that, if they're not familiar with the sauce, there's a chance to save a little bit of money and give it a shot. And we hope that everybody enjoys it.
I love that. And for our listeners, we'll include the website as well as the social media handles in the show notes so you guys can reference them later. And again, I would encourage listeners to at least connect and just see all the cool things that Mrs. Griffin's is doing, because clearly, as you can tell, they've got a great group of people over there. They take pride in what they do, and they've got a tremendous focus. I have to commend you for that as well. Having that focus, I think, is really, really key. So, all right, let's switch back to barbecue for a bit, and I'm going to ask you guys personally, what is your favorite cut of meat to put Miss Griffin's sauce on?
I'm really partial to a smoked chicken breast is really good with Miss Griffin's. Of course, the pork, and God, what's that sausage that comes out of Alabama? That's, I know it's sold in Kroger, Carnegie or something. Man, if you get some of that stuff and you dip it in Miss Griffin's, it's the bomb. But I have to say, good little Miss Griffin's original with some smoked chicken breast is hard to beat.
I'll have to agree with Roland. I mean, that's kind of my go-to as well. But I mean, I use it personally as a dipping sauce, and used it in some other things. But yeah, I'd have to agree with him on the chicken.
Pulled pork and chopped pork too are pretty strong seconds. Yeah. So.
Well, you heard it right here. Chicken and pork. Those are the two favorite things for Roland and Josh to put Mrs. Griffin's on. And again, too, to remind our listeners, there's a hot version, there's a hickory smoke version, there's a sweet version, and then there's the old school original. So, heck, try them all. See which one you like the best. I think that hickory smoke sounds intriguing. I'm curious with the hickory smoke, how do you get the hickory smoke in there? I've always wondered that.
It's a hard process.
I figured
get it done all the time. Yeah.
Okay. I figured it was complex. I've always tried to figure out, how the heck do they do that? But at any rate, and again, for our listeners, griffinsbbq.com. You can find them on social media as well. All right. So as we wind down the show, I want to chat about some words of wisdom from both of you guys. And really it's around, and this is going to be a little bit different because normally we do words of wisdom about, competition barbecue or words of wisdom on how to start a barbecue team. But this one's going to be a little bit different. And I think it has more to do with, company and culture, because I think just chatting with you two gentlemen, I can tell that you've got a very strong culture. So let's camp out on culture for a second. And I'll start with you, Roland. How do you build a culture? What are some words of wisdom that you can share for those listeners out there who are building a company of their own, whether it doesn't matter, what the industry is? How do you build a culture like you have at Mrs. Griffin's?
Well, Miss Griffin's been in business 90 years. Don't really consider myself the owner. I feel almost like a custodian. And in the South, God and family and barbecue and Miss Griffin's. We take those things very seriously, and when we go to batch, we even with the price inflation that's gone up, we're tempted to cut the quality or something like that, but we make it the same quality, and we're very, very proud of that. And Josh will be the first one to stand up and say, it's got to be right, or it's not Miss Griffin's. And no batch ever leaves the tank until it's QC'd and we know it's right. And I think just really putting the focus on consistency in the product and giving the people a little something different that's not so sweet and sugary. A lot of people love that. We hear stories all the time, and just very flattering. And we appreciate each and every one of them. What would you culture, Miss Griffin's?
I agree with you. I mean, that's, there's not, as he stated, you got to make sure that, let's say, a bottle you opened a year later is the same as the bottle you opened last month. It's got to remain consistent.
Or 30 or 40 years ago. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I know when I go out in stores and I see these bottles that I have my handprint per se in each bottle, and I want to make sure that it's right. And, we take, as he said, we take a lot of pride in that. And, like I've mentioned before, everything I do is, for the good of this company. And I feel like, you've got to be that way or else why work? But then I'll kind of leave it at that.
That's right.
We're just, Kurt, the only thing I can say, the culture, the Miss Griffin's history. I mean, if you wrote a book about commercial barbecue sauce since the turn of the 20th century, a lot of the barbecue regional trends coming out of Columbia, coming to Macon, are written around Miss Griffin's. Can you believe that? And that's something that I own, and I'm like, wow, this is so special. Yesterday, I'm looking around, I'm standing in the governor's office, really? With, people like Tony and Myron Mixon from Barbecue Warriors, and the governor signed a proclamation, and we're the oldest barbecue sauce, arguably in the United States, for sure, Georgia. And I hand the governor a bottle, and he goes, "Oh, I know that stuff." And
Wow.
that's what bigger pat on the back. I feel very, very lucky and fortunate to have somebody like Josh helping me to get this stuff out to the stores.
I love it. That is a very cool, you're exactly right. Reflecting on just, standing in the governor's office, and the governor knows exactly what kind of sauce, you're dealing with. So that's pretty cool and you mentioned some of those stories as well. So again, we appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. And again, love the story, love the history, love the tradition and the culture. So yeah, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Anytime, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.